Before I start this video, I want to say please don't go out of your way to harass anyone in this video. I don't think harassing anyone will change anything, and it kind of just makes you look a little immature. I've decided to make this video as sort of a way for people to make an informed decision on who they want to support. This video is in no way intended to be inflammatory or to spark any further drama. I just want to provide a perspective of the situation from someone that isn't directly involved in the current drama surrounding these two individuals, because I understand that there's a lot of frustration with everyone involved in this situation, so this is my video on the situation. Now, I think it's really important to mention when you have a bias against one when you're making this sort of video, and so I want to make it clear now that I have both bad experiences with Cupidite and Yummicactus and JuniDrawz. They've all wronged me in some sort of way, but because this video is going to be centered on Juni and Yumi, I'm not really going to be mentioning why I have issues with Cupidite. However, I will be bringing up the Cupidite drama very briefly for moments where I need to add in context, but this video isn't going to be formatted in a sort of Cupidite versus Yumi and Juni way, because I don't really think that's a very appropriate way to handle these people's allegations. I feel like if you're seeing this situation as Cupidite versus Yumi and Juni, then I feel like it's very hard to hold both of these parties accountable, because it kind of makes it so you're incentivized to side with one of these parties even though both parties have done bad things. And so this video is only going to focus on JuniDrawz and Yummicactus. With that disclaimer out of the way, I think I'm going to start this video by talking about my personal bad experience with Yumi and Juni. And I will just say that I have talked to them privately about this and we're on better terms now, but what they did was pretty severe, and so I'm only mentioning it publicly so that people know that this has happened. But I will make it clear that I don't want anyone harassing them over this, because I personally have decided to just move on from this. But I still understand that this is something that is very important and needs to be mentioned. So let's get into my experience with JuniDrawz and Yummicactus. I think it's important to mention that both Juni and Yumi are minors, and I'm 19. But at the time of this situation, Juni would have been 15, Yumi would have been 16, and I was 18. The ages aren't exactly relevant here, but I guess it does show that Yumi and Juni are younger and will make mistakes because they're younger people. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that they were malicious during this situation, and that their malicious intentions ended up with me being very affected and paranoid. And so let's explain what happened. Earlier this year, I made a video detailing the abuse I went through from a former commentary YouTuber. This YouTuber went by the name of Slimed Alien, and they made a lot of videos on the birdie situation. Now, in my video, I provide a lot of evidence for the abuse I went through, and essentially, to sum it up for those who haven't watched the video, Slime would essentially try to manipulate me into being into a relationship with him, and would constantly berate me for not choosing to date him and being with my boyfriend instead. He would pressure me with self-harm, he would pressure me by threatening suicide. He would spread lies about me and said I led him on, even though I had very clearly said that I wasn't interested in a relationship with him. And so Slime basically just was not a good person at all. And after posting that video, everyone could pretty much see that Slime was very manipulative and abusive towards me. There was only really a few people who were Slime's friends who defended Slime for what they put me through, and Juni and Yumi were unfortunately a part of that group who defended someone that abused me. I will just say that it was more so Yumi that was defending my abuser, but Juni played a role in covering up the fact that they were friends with someone who was outed as an abuser. Anyways, the first instance of one of them defending my abuser was when Yumi forwarded a message from one of their Discord admins, which was basically an extremely long paragraph blaming me for the abuse that I went through and claiming that I was actually the abuser, despite there being absolutely zero proof to back this up. The paragraph also just blames me for all the times Slime would hurt himself because I wouldn't be in a relationship with him. And honestly, the paragraph just has a lot of gaslighting and things that are just completely untrue. Now, I don't really think I need to say this, but this isn't a good thing to send to someone who has just came out with video detailing the abuse they went through, especially not a video with over 100 screenshots worth of evidence. But I digress. After Yumi sent that message, I just ignored it and hoped that nothing came of it because I was honestly exhausted at the time and I really didn't want to re-explain my entire experience with slime, especially not to someone who clearly had misinterpreted my videos so poorly. So I just ignored it. The next day, Yumi comes back into my DMs and kind of apologizes, but not really. And Yumi says that the reason why they acted so harshly to me is because they had a bias because they had watched the video with Slime and Slime had excused everything they had done in the video. And Yumi had kind of led me to believe that they were more so on my side and that they didn't like what Slime was doing. And Yumi asked if they could make a video on the situation. This was followed by Yumi asking a few questions related to the video that they were going to make. I even helped Yumi point out some of the manipulation tactics that Slime was actively using in this situation. And well, Yumi's video came out and it was basically Yumi defending my abuser. And in the comments section, Yumi would delete any comments defending me or saying that this video was dishonest. So when I opened the video, it was just full of Yumi's friends defending my abuser and basically claiming that I was crazy. The video itself was very bad, and whilst I don't have it saved, I do remember a segment of the video where Yumi basically called me manipulative and basically villainized me for coming out about my abuse. This really affected me because I was led to believe that Yumi understood my side and really understood the gravity of what Slime did to me, but I was wrong. After the video was released, I watched as Yumi and Johnny were very friendly in public with Slime. They would allow Slime to make jokes about abusing me and abuse in general, and they would engage in these jokes and heart these jokes that Slime would make. And I honestly just decided to ignore it and accept that I was lied to. After that encounter, I was feeling very paranoid knowing that two pretty popular commentators were friends with someone who abused me and was actively lying about me, but I tried my best to move on. Just continued to post normally and basically move on. Around a month later, Johnny posts a community tab trying to accuse me of fagging them on my community tab and talking about them, but none of the proof that they had put in this post even related to what they were claiming. The first slide was an image of me telling people to beware of false information in general. And then the second slide was an image from my straw page. In this image from my straw page, I say that I don't want to interact with attention-seeking people who start drama. And the thing is about that screenshot is that it couldn't possibly be about Shuni or Yumi because my straw page has looked like that since I created it, and I created it before I knew any of those people. But I digress. The third screenshot, and the only screenshot that is evidence of me talking about them, is a screenshot from when I was in a stream that was about them, and I was just mentioning my experience with how they had handled my situation, which doesn't really warrant an entire call out community tab, but that isn't my biggest issue with this post. In JuniDrawz community tab posts, they use a lot of inflammatory language and words with big implications such as weird and obsessive, and also exaggerates on my age, claiming that I was 19 and that Yumi was 16. Basically, the post just tries to paint me as a creep for briefly speaking about how I didn't like how Yumi handled my situation. And well, you could make the argument that maybe Shuni didn't understand the implications behind using the words weird and obsessive and lying about my age and constantly mentioning the fact that I'm an adult in a situation where it's not relevant. But But I think if Juni doesn't understand the implications behind doing that, then they should not be in commentary, because many people in the comments section picked up on the implications that they were making towards me. And so I don't think it's a stretch to say that Juni was trying to claim that I was some sort of predator or creep for just criticizing Yumi. But again, as I usually do, I just ignored the post and moved on. Eventually the post was taken down because people were calling them out for how weirdly they had worded the post. I will just say that this isn't the first or last time that they have used inflammatory language to make a situation seem like something that it's not. However, that is something I'm going to get into later on, because it is something that is present in most of their dramas. Anyways, the next instance of me, Juni, and Yumi sort of clashing was when I had made a post talking about how I didn't really like how Yumi had handled my situation with my abuser. This happened in June of 2025. I had decided to do it at this point because a lot of people were criticizing how Yumi had handled situations, and I thought it would be a more appropriate time to bring it up because it was something that was done by Yumi that was extremely harmful to me, and I thought that it was important that people knew that the things that Yumi and Juni were doing were genuinely hurting people's psyche, because a lot of the things that they were being called out for were honestly a little petty, and so I decided to mention something that was more serious because I felt it was important. And Juni and Yumi's response to this was initially to call me a liar and say that I'm spreading false information, and also allegedly that I had blocked them so that they couldn't talk to me at all, which wasn't true. I just unfriended them after I had found out that they were friends of my abuser. It took a few days of them lying about me for them to actually contact me and clear things up. And well, I actually want to show the conversation of this happening itself, because at first they genuinely tried to paint me as a creep for having evidence that they were lying about me. And so allow me to show that now. Also, I want to say during the recording while I'm annotating our conversation, I don't really take it seriously because it's very hard to take someone seriously when you know they're lying. But yeah, onto the recording. Okay, so we had the start of the conversation where they basically say hi and I ask what do they want to talk about. They say, your post about Yumi. I say, okay, say what you want to say. They say, sorry if this is rude, but why exactly did you post it? It seems like an obvious question, but you never contacted me or Yumi about his video on slime, and I've been ghosted for a while. You could have reached out to us instead of posting about us to the internet when it could have been easily resolved, but because of the video, so many people have been harassing me and him, and I don't understand why there was no communication. I said, I don't want to be communicated after being misled about you and slime being friends. Juni denies this and says, but I'm not friends with slime. They completely deny that they're friends with slime, so I'm like, watch this. And then I show evidence of them giving slime special treatment. Here you can see that slime had access to the mod core so that they could still VC with the mods, basically Yumi, Juni, and their friend group, and so that people won't know that they're all friends, basically. And you can see here, Slime is saying why they have permission to see the mod core. And then I have here, Slime joking about abuse. And we have Juni hearting it. We have admins also hearting it. And then it sends Juni the message of their boyfriend, which is Yumi, sending me that very awful message, blaming me for being abused, which is here. And then Juni just denies it and says, not to be rude, but that doesn't make me friends with Slime. And I said, it's okay, I have more proof. And immediately, Juni goes, have you been stalking me? Now, that's not exactly how you are supposed to react to someone proving that you're lying to them. I'm very frustrated. I say, yeah, of course you would say something like that. You're not a victim here for siding with an abuser. Juni says, you're more than creeping me out with the obsessiveness that you've gone through to prove that I'm friends with your abuser. Now, I would kind of understand it if I was sending private messages that were not in a public Discord server with thousands of people in, but that was in a server with thousands of people in. So I say, here's some more proof. And we have Yumi being friends with Slime and also Cupidite at the time. We have them joking in Yummicactus's live stream about like abuse again. And then we have a interaction between Slime and Juni. I don't remember the context of this post, but they just deny it. hey, Shiesta, not to be rude, but I'm not friends with slime. And I'm just like, so we're just lying. And they say, you are really weird. Again, that doesn't really address the proof that I've given them. And they bring up the fact that I'm an adult, which isn't anything to do with the fact that they're lying to me. And I point out the fact that they call every adult that doesn't agree with them a creep. And then they deny calling me a creep. And then I send them screenshots of them calling me a creep. And then they say I'm a creep after saying they're not calling me a creep, which is strange. And now some of you probably are watching this and wondering, Shiesta, why are you laughing? What if they're really telling the truth? What if Juni and Yumi were never friends with slime? Now, after this conversation, Yumi apologized for making the video where they downplayed me being abused by slime, and Yumi admitted that this video was made out of bias. All of that paired with all of the screenshots of Yumi, Juni, and slime very clearly being friendly with each other, I think it's pretty safe to say that they were friends. Anyways, as stated before, Yumi has apologized for the video that they made downplaying my abuse, and I've decided to forgive them. I only mentioned this segment because I felt like it was very important, because realistically, if Yumi's video had performed well and people started siding with my abuser, that really could have had a horrible impact on the community, and slime may have been able to go on and have a platform despite abusing me and actively spreading lies about me. It was a really scary situation to deal with, and whilst I joke about it to cope, I was extremely scared and really going through it. Being villainized for coming out about being abused was definitely not for the weak, and I definitely felt it impacts the way I felt as a person and about the people around me, and just a lot of really dark side effects that I don't really want to talk about publicly. When handling situations like abuse, you need to be mature and unbiased and look at the facts, even if the person being accused is your friend. In this instance, Yumi and Juni were unable to do this, and it ended up impacting me pretty badly. I will give them nuance though, and I understand that they were young and, 15 and 16, maybe you're not gonna make the best decisions. I just hope that they genuinely did learn from what they did, and that when they say they're sorry for what they put me through, that they're actually sorry, because it really did affect me. Anyways, now that I've gone over my own personal experience with Juni and Yumi and how they've mishandled their platform, I'm going to be talking about the most recent accusations against them. I will be going over their responses after I'm done talking about the most recent accusations, but for now, let's get into the accusations. So, if you know anything about Juni or Yumi, you would understand that they both have called out people who are necrophiles and problematic people in general. So, a lot of people were surprised when a document was released detailing that both Juni and Yumi had been drawing necrophilic art. And I'm not going to show certain pieces because some of them are not safe for work, but I will show the art that they drew of their OCs in the Necrophile Pride Flag palette. Now, Yumi and Juni claimed that they did this to make fun of people who genuinely were necrophiles, but the problem I have with that is that they've criticized people for doing this in the past, and so basically they're kind of just really big hypocrites. Both Juni and Yumi have said that they were influenced by their friendship group at the time, and specifically by a person named Dippy who would stream gore to them and introduce them to gore in the first place. And I think it's important to make it clear that I think they are a victim of being streamed gore to and being exposed to gore, because gore is a very traumatic thing to witness, but I do think it's completely wrong to pretend like they didn't ask to see gore at some points, and the fact that they were actively seeking out this content after being introduced to it by Dippy. My conclusion to this? I think they're all in the wrong. I would genuinely have less of an issue with Juni and Yumi being outed for watching gore if they weren't actively calling out people who did the same. I feel like if Juni and Yumi were more nuanced people and didn't completely berate people for being influenced by others like they themselves were, then the fact that they've been doing this stuff would be a lot less damning, but that simply wasn't the case. Whether you decide to forgive them for drawing and consuming this content is up to you, but I definitely don't believe they should be allowed to criticize other people for doing the same thing that they've been doing in secret. And that if Juni or Yumi ever return to commentary like this, I think that they should definitely have a more nuanced approach. Otherwise, it just makes them seem like a big hypocrite. I also want to say that I do personally find the content that they've been consuming and creating very disturbing and disgusting, but I also do understand that they're young and were influenced by the people around them, but it's still not an excuse and they need to be accountable for that without pointing fingers at others. On multiple occasions, both Juni and Yumi have seeked out people's personal information. One instance of this was with Your Triple Blocked, an artist that Juni and Yumi were having drama with for over a few months. This drama was pretty much just a back and forth that lasted months and is arguably still ongoing. In my personal opinion, I think both parties are in the wrong for both mutually fueling the fire, but Yuni and Juni took the drama too far and ended up trying to seek out Your Triple Block's personal information. For example, here is a screenshot of Yumi saying that they have Chrissy or Your Triple Block's first name and an idea of their location. Of course, this is extremely messed up to do, and to seek out someone's personal information over internet drama is completely irrational. And in these screenshots, it's very clear that they're aware of how evil they're being. And it's extremely clear that they were planning to use this information over Chrissy's head. I especially hate the wording, Chrissy has no idea how badly they've screwed themselves over, and then they proceed to flaunt their personal information. It's extremely malicious, and there's absolutely no way of getting around that. Nothing can justify finding someone's personal information over petty TikTok drama, and Juni and Yumi's video addressing this is completely lackluster and doesn't address how they would seek out people's personal information whatsoever. On the topic of Your Triple Blocked, I'm going to talk about other instances of them harassing Your Triple Blocked, because there are many instances of both Juni and Yumi doing so, and what frustrates me more is that both Juni and Yumi painted themselves as victims of Chrissy, even though they were seeking out Chrissy's personal information and also instigating harassment against them. For example, here's JuniDrawz asking their friend to make an account dedicated to harassing Chrissy. Juni also offers Dippy money to harass Chrissy. Here's multiple screenshots of Juni asking Dippy to harass Chrissy. It's important to note that this was not a one-time instance, and that when you look at the dates of these messages being sent, it's very clearly over many different instances. There's also instances of Juni weaponizing their mental health to make people side with them during the Chrissy drama, and while some may argue that maybe Juni was actually stressed and planning on hurting themselves, however, this message and the way it's worded seems really malicious, and I mean, they're saying that they're going to hurt themselves for the sake of gaining the public's favor, which is just so messed up. But I digress. There's also a screenshot of Juni saying that they're going to rape Chrissy, which is kind of crazy because in the Chrissy drama, Juni and Yumi claimed that Chrissy was sexually harassing them for making fat jokes and inflation jokes towards them. And whilst I think making inflation jokes towards people who don't consent is wrong, you can't really complain if you're doing the same thing but worse. It's also wrong that you complain that your not safe for work art was leaked, but then you leak other people's not safe for work. I also forgot to mention this before, but Yumi had allegedly put Chrissy's personal information on a harassment site so that Chrissy could potentially get harassed and witch hunted. Which, honestly, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's so crazy and ironic that they claimed that Chrissy was harassing them when they are going above and beyond to harass Chrissy in any sort of way ever. Final thing I have to add to Chrissy being harassed by Yumi and JuniDrawz is Yumi asking people to dox Chrissy on their alt and also making deepfakes of Chrissy. which, I mean, I don't really think I need to explain why this is wrong. I mean, it's just kind of shocking how hypocritical they both are. These screenshots are so incriminating, it's completely shocking, but unfortunately, Chrissy isn't the only person that both Yumi and Juni have harassed. The next person I'm going to be talking about is someone called JuniDrawz. JuniDrawz is a small commentary YouTuber who recently joined the commentary community. They coincidentally joined the commentary community after JuniDrawz had made a call-out video on Cupidite, another artist with controversy surrounding them. And well, shortly after Momo had joined the community, both Juni and Yumi accused them publicly of being Cupidite. Their evidence being that JuniDrawz had a similar art style to Cupidite, and that coincidentally Momo had joined the community shortly after Cupidite was called out. In the document made to call out JuniDrawz, they falsely accused Momo of being a predator and a groomer because they thought that this person was Cupidite. This led to JuniDrawz being harassed and accused of being a predator and a groomer, despite the evidence not being sufficient enough to actually warrant this claim. Momo did everything she could to prove that she was not Cupidite, but Juni and Yumi ignored this completely and still claimed that this person was Cupidite. There was multiple aspects that contradicted the claim that Momo was Cupidite, and yet both Yumi and Juni ignored this and claimed that this person was Cupidite until enough people called them out for this false accusation. Even after that, from what I know, all they did was silently remove the posts accusing Momo and only apologize to Momo in private rather than in public. I feel as if this situation alone really demonstrates how irresponsible both Yumi and Juni are with their commentary and their platforms. And personally, if I was a Juni or Yumi fan, I would definitely see this situation and think twice about who I'm supporting, because this is a very big misstep. I also want to say that initially when people were posting proof of Momo not being Cupidite, Yumi tried to silence them by copyright striking their video, which is absolutely disgusting and a complete misuse of YouTube's policies. The next instance of harassment from Juni and Yumi that I'm going to be talking about is towards Cupidite. And I know for some people that Cupidite is kind of a grey area for many people, but I still think it's important to highlight areas where Yumi and Juni could have handled this situation better, because there is a lot that they have done to make this situation worse and more confusing for people to follow. An example of Yummicactus mishandling the situation would be Yummicactus asking people to mass report their account. This is a violation of YouTube's terms of service, but also it's not like Yummicactus is doing this for a valid reason. In the screenshot, it says that they're doing this because they think it would be funny if they got Cupidite's channel taken down. And whilst I don't necessarily like Cupidite, this definitely makes the situation way more complex and really highlights the fact that Juni and Yumi really shouldn't be the ones to be handling this situation. I also want to note that this message was sent before Cupidite had the more serious allegations made against them. And so that pretty much confirms that this is out of pure malice due to the fact that Juni, Yumi and Cupidite are no longer friends. And I do understand that Yumi was 16, almost 17 here, but it's still not really acceptable to be handling situations like this. And it really does fit into the pattern of both Yumi and Juni mishandling situations and making them worse. Juni also got their friends to message Cupidite paranoia-inducing things, which again is really immature and just going to make the situation worse, but I digress. There are more instances of Juni and Yumi mishandling situations, but I feel as if this is enough to really explain my point. The next section we'll be moving on to is the manipulation and deception from Juni and Yumi, so let's get into it. In many instances, Juni has been very manipulative and weaponized their mental health to get people to side with them. I've already shown this screenshot before, but during the Chrissy drama, Juni says that they will cut themselves to get people to side with them. Juni also, during another drama, faked being in a psych ward for sympathy, which is honestly inexcusable. It's completely manipulative and abusive to use your mental health as a weapon to other people when you're being confronted for something. And I do completely understand getting stressed and not knowing what to do when you're being criticized. However, that's when you have to step back and think, is commentary really for me? Because if your response to every single situation is to use your mental health or to point fingers at other people, then you aren't ready to be a commentary YouTuber. Because no matter how good of a commentary YouTuber you are, you're always gonna get something wrong, and it's bound to happen no matter what you do. And if your response to falsely accusing people or getting things wrong is to just use your mental health against other people, then you aren't ready for commentary. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're a horrible person and you can't do anything. However, it does mean that maybe you should wait until you're more mature and you're ready to be in a space where you're going to be criticized if you get something wrong. Juni has admitted to faking mental breakdowns to start drama, and this can be exemplified in this screenshot. It's honestly just extremely insensitive to do, knowing that people can have mental breakdowns in public and you're using that to your advantage. I don't know, it just really grosses me out, but so does a lot of the things in this video. Anyways, the next thing I want to mention is how Yumi and Juni would hide their ages in public. And well, you may be thinking, oh, they're just practicing online safety. But if you know Juni and Yumi, they use their age a lot as a weapon. And whenever they would have drama with someone who is like 18, they would say stuff like, you're harassing a minor, even though they're not exactly young minors. Juni is 16 and Yumi is 17. And of course, 17 and 16-year-olds aren't going to be extremely mature, but they aren't exactly young enough to be absolved of all guilt. And if they act malicious, then that's still something that is bad. Them seeking out people that they don't like doxes is still wrong because they are old enough to understand that this is not okay. Juni recognizes that they weaponize their age a lot and that they use the word adult very loosely, which in the end makes situations seem worse than they are, and Juni is aware of this. To sum up this section, Juni and Yumi have used manipulative tactics to sway the public in their favor, and I can only hope that they stop doing this. But let's get on to the next section. Both Juni and Yumi have been outed for drawing Nazi artwork, and despite Yumi and Juni not giving nuance to those other people who have been outed for doing the same, I have decided that I will give nuance because I think giving nuance is good and makes people a lot less volatile. So first, I'm going to be talking about Juni and their allegations of drawing Nazi artwork. Juni and their friend group made a drawing prompt challenge where basically they had problematic August, and essentially the challenge was made to be as problematic as possible. And one of the prompts was to draw one of your OCs in a SS uniform, which is why the art of Juni's OC in an SS uniform exists. Personally, I don't think the fact that this was a challenge makes the fact that Juni drew their OC in an SS uniform okay at all, because Juni and Yumi both understood that drawing these sort of things, no matter the context, isn't okay because they've both called out people for doing this. And whilst their friendship group did encourage this sort of behavior, it still doesn't make it okay, especially when you're actively calling out other people whilst doing the same thing that you're calling out. There really isn't much I can say about this other than being upset that this is very insensitive and wrong for them to do. All I can hope is that Juni and Yumi both understand that they can't be hypocrites and draw Nazi uniforms when they call out others for doing so. For Yumi's case of drawing Nazi uniforms, the context was a little bit different, and they were drawing it to make fun of their old self who was groomed by Nazis, but still I find that art a little bit distasteful. I just think if you're going to do these things, maybe don't call out other people in public for doing them, because eventually you will be called out for being a hypocrite, and that's exactly what happened in this instance. On to the next section. This section's gonna be pretty short, and basically I'm just gonna quickly talk about how Juni and Yumi were outed for making rape jokes. Now, me personally, I don't have an issue with victims of assault making jokes about rape because it's okay to joke about your own experiences. Juni and Yumi seem to only make these jokes in private, which means I can't really complain about them doing that. But the one issue that I do have is that they have made jokes about raping other people, which definitely crosses a line. The instance where they do this is something I've already mentioned before in this video, but I'll mention it again because I still think it's not okay. Juni jokes about raping Chrissy very briefly, and that's wrong because they're not there to consent to that. And when you're actively having drama with someone, maybe the last thing you want to do is to make jokes like that about them. I will just say that Juni's friend in this screenshot very clearly makes the joke first, but Juni does agree with the joke and plays along with it, and so that's not good. But other than that, that's all I really have to say for this section. Let's move on to the next section. On the 16th of November, JuniDrawz posted a response video to the allegations, and this section will be going over this response, and I'll be giving my personal thoughts and opinions on it. You don't have to agree with my points, but I hope you'll find my commentary interesting. With that in mind, I'm gonna start playing clips and then giving my opinions on these clips. The first clip we'll be starting with is with Juni denouncing their past actions.
I'm not afraid of my past actions, and I want to publicly condemn them. Regardless of what I was groomed or coerced into doing when I was 15, I want to make it very clear that those actions should not be replicated, idolized, or sought after. I'm nothing but disgusted with the person I became while under the influence of the people I thought were my friends and the adults in my life. And I want to make it 110% clear at the start of this video that I stopped all of this months ago. I will never recreate my actions ever again. Despite my explanation of what truly happened, I am fully responsible for the things I engaged in, and I'm saying this out of genuine meaning. Nothing in this video is made to excuse my actions.
One of the biggest issues that I have with this video is that Juni claims that Dippy groomed them. However, Juni neglects to mention Dippy's age until midway through the video. But for context, Dippy is 1 year and 2 months older than Juni, and whilst grooming can happen under smaller age gaps, Juni doesn't really provide any evidence to suggest that there is grooming. Now, what Dippy did was disgusting. Dippy introduced Juni and Yumi to gore, which is an extremely traumatic thing to experience. And I don't think that just because this wasn't actually grooming, that Juni doesn't have a right to be upset by this. I just think it's very important to not mislabel things, because from what I can see in the video, there's no intentional isolation from Dippy or any of the main grooming tactics that need to be present for a situation to be classified as grooming. I always think it's important to remember that grooming is simply just a combination of manipulation tactics used to isolate the victim and make them overly attached to the abuser. I find that a lot of people online misuse the word grooming, and I think it's very important to seek out other terms that may fit your situation better, because I don't think grooming was the correct one to use here. Sorry for the little tangent, it's just something I wanted to quickly mention. Anyways, on to the next clip.
I never wanted to make this stuff public in the first place, but my groomer is working with my doxers, giving them information and leaking sexually explicit content of me online, as well as giving child predators access to my nudes and self-harm pictures, and spreading them online.
I can confirm that there are a group of people seeking out Juni's personal information and have unfortunately successfully seeked out Juni's information. I contacted both Yumi and Juni while making this video to help me get any other context, and they were able to send me proof that they had been harassed by this group of people and that they had found their phone number and been texting them through their phone number, which is honestly extremely scary. And even if Juni has done wrong, I don't think it's acceptable whatsoever to dox pictures of their face and threaten them, because that actually does nothing to help Juni or Yumi improve as people. One small correction I'll make to Juni's video though is that these people actually do not have Juni's nudes. These people simply lied about having his nudes to make Juni more scared, which is really messed up and honestly just takes away from this group's credibility.
And although at the time me and my boyfriend, Yumi, had never done anything like that, we empathized with him and of course we still loved him. I was 15 at the time when things started to become a very not okay situation. We were encouraged to talk about our kinks around Dippy and even answered extensive questions about our sex life that he would send us on VCs.
Something that does frustrate me here is that Juni neglects to mention Dippy's age here, only mentioning their own. And for context, Juni would have been 15 here and Dippy would have been 16. And so I really don't like the implication that is made here. This is unfortunately a pattern I've noticed in Juni's videos where they won't mention the ages of certain people, and it kind of makes it seem like a situation of an adult or someone significantly older being involved in the situation, when in reality there's not.
Me and my boyfriend are both victims of rape and exploitation, and we had a lot of sexual trauma over this that we had voiced to Dippy. And in response, Dippy would encourage us to make rape jokes and tell him about our kinks and fetishes surrounding our sexual assault trauma.
I kind of wish for this segment that there was proof of Dippy encouraging these jokes after you told him about your trauma, because otherwise it's simply hearsay, and when you have a history of bending the truth, it's kind of hard to believe what you're saying. And I understand that a lot of these instances may have happened in voice school. However, it's probably best to just not bring them up if that did happen and you have no evidence of it, because unfortunately a lot of people are very distrustful with what you're saying, and I can't blame them because you've also handled situations with me very poorly. The rest of this segment goes on to talk about their interactions with Dippy, and it's kind of framed in a light where Dippy is seen as a predator, which kind of frustrates me a lot. I feel like a video like this should be apologizing for being a hypocrite and all of the problematic stuff that you've done.
But obviously, in retrospect, I'm grossed out that someone I thought was my friend got my boyfriend to draw necrophilic NSFW of me and him when we were 15 and 16 and had them send it to him.
This is another instance of Juni framing the actions of Dippy in a very predatory way, when in reality, Yumi would have been the exact same age as Dippy when this happened. It's things like this that downplay the seriousness of grooming, and it's really frustrating that Juni is perpetuating this. Now it's time to get on to Yumi's segment of Juni's video, and honestly, I do prefer Yumi's segment over Juni's because Yumi seems to hold himself more accountable than Juni does. When I play Yumi's clips, I'm sorry there's going to be a lot of just the clip talking, because I feel like a lot of clips speak for themselves, and Yumi does a pretty good job at holding themselves accountable, and I want you to see this. So let's get into the clips.
Hi there, it's me, Yumi, Juni's partner. I have some explaining to do myself, and I will be addressing everything I can. I apologize if I get emotional during any of my segment. I'll try to discuss everything I can handle, and I'm gonna be just straight to the point. I want to apologize first, specifically to anyone offended, disappointed, disgusted, and angry with me before I explain what happened. Well, everything has been explained already, but I must add I haven't drawn or participated in any of this content in months. They're trying to say I did as recently in October, but I would sometimes repost screenshots of old stuff I drew, and that doesn't excuse anything. I just wanted to make that clear. And I want it to be known that I do not and never have condoned my own actions. These actions include things like participating in gore watch parties, drawing SS uniforms, drawing necro content of myself and my partner, and overall being a complete hypocrite and very apathetic person. I did not condone what I was doing, not even when I was actively doing it. There was acknowledgement that what I was participating in was wrong, there was regret and disgust established, and this is why I make the effort to change and do better.
I can really appreciate that Yumi doesn't point fingers at other people during this segment, and that to me, it seems that Yumi fully regrets engaging in this content. Despite my personal bad experiences with Yumi, for me it does feel as if he is being sincere in these clips, and I'm able to feel empathy for the things that he was exposed to, because he does a pretty good job at explaining how it negatively impacted him and how he coped with these feelings. I'm going to continue to play more clips from Yumi's segment because I think it's very important to hear his perspective.
And we all agreed with each other that the environment we created for ourselves was a horrible echo chamber of self-destruction. We all agreed we were going to change and grow, and we all wanted to help each other. But it's clear that, I guess, I was lied to.
Something that I've had an issue with from the call-out post on Yumi and Juni is that the group don't seem to fully acknowledge that they're in the wrong just as much as Yumi and Juni, and that maybe they shouldn't be the ones to be calling out Yumi and Juni, considering they are also partially at fault for this situation. Because everyone is in the wrong here, it doesn't feel right that this is publicized by the same people that were in the group encouraging Yumi and Juni to act in this way. Whilst it's clear that what Yumi Yumi and Juni did was undoubtedly wrong, it's also important to acknowledge that this was a very personal and complicated matter that really cannot be handled by a bunch of people who have different grudges against each other, because now it's just this very big mess. And well, despite everyone being bad in this situation, it's still very clearly a traumatic situation for everyone involved. The next few clips are just going to be Yumi explaining how the way they coped with seeing gore, it was to draw this gore, and I personally found understanding Yumi's mindset towards this stuff very important, and that's why I've decided to include these clips.
And when that content was streamed to me, it was terrible. The images and the videos I saw would replay in my head, and they still replay in my head to this day, and it's very difficult to forget what you see when it comes to things like this. And to deal with this, I had two coping mechanisms. To deal with the images I couldn't erase from my mind, I would just draw gore. I would draw gore, and it helped me deal with it. And to clarify, I never took screenshots or videos or anything for direct one-on-one references for my own art. It was all drawn from memory. It was a cope in a very abstract way. And the only reason I considered myself a necrophile was because I essentially gaslit myself into and attached myself to that word, and I don't know why, and I feel horrible for it because I was so disgusted in everything I was seeing. I really was, and I want people to believe that, but I don't know if people will believe that because of the way I dealt with that disgust, and I'm so sorry.
I do genuinely have empathy for Yumi, and I hope they can recover from the stuff that they have seen. People do cope in weird ways after experiencing bad things, and I really hope that Yumi is being honest when they say that this is why they did the stuff that they did. Of course, with certain things like the doxing, etc., that can't be excused by anything, but with this, I can understand that Yumi went through a traumatic thing and tried to cope with it in a way that isn't exactly very good for you. But I can understand when you're faced with such horrific content, it's really hard to know what you're supposed to do. And I want to say this for anyone who's watching this video and this might resonate with. If you're faced with horrific content such as gore, you do not need to act like it doesn't affect you. It's okay if you cry and you feel sick when you see this content. It's also okay if you feel apathetic and dissociated when you see this content. Your brain will scramble to find a way to cope with experiencing something traumatic. I see a lot of people who are exposed to gore and they feel like they need to pretend like they weren't affected. But I want to say that it's okay. You can be affected by this. And don't think that the people who are sending you this content are winning if you get emotional. Because the truth is that they've already lost by harassing you in such a horrible way. And that your ability to be empathetic and feel sad for the victims in those videos is a gift. And it's good to feel this way. It's good to feel empathetic towards those around you. You can't understand what good feelings feel like unless you experience the bad in life. I'm sorry if that tangent seems a bit random, but I feel like there's a lot of people who need to hear this, because trying to pretend like you're fine is how people get desensitized to such traumatic content and end up going down dark rabbit holes. Anyways, with that out of the way, I'm going to get on to the next section. This section is just going to be a very small section going over Yumi and Juni's ex-friends, because I feel like it's important to emphasize that these people have also done wrong. For example, a few of these people in the friendship group had a history of doxing and are actively doxing Yumi and Juni as of recording this video. For example, they've made a proof server against Juni and Yumi and they're letting anyone who asks into it. And this proof server has images of Yumi and Juni's faces, a video of Juni walking into their apartment, and other personal stuff that doesn't really correlate to the allegations made against Juni and Yumi. Whilst I understand that Juni and Yumi have done things wrong, doxing them and spreading their personal information only worsens the situation and complicates it even further. There are no sides to pick in this drama because everyone is in the wrong, but it is very clear that Juni and Yumi's ex-friends are trying to come on top of this by doxing them to get back at them, and I think that's really messed up and definitely indicates that these people are kind of unwilling to change. I hope that these people realize that what they're doing is genuinely not helpful, but I can only really hope that. The best thing to take away from this segment is to consume any proof made by Juni and Yumi's ex-friends pretty cautiously, because there is likely bias and missing context. And with that, let's move on to our final section. I think one of the main things that we can all take away from this is that there is truly no one in the right in this situation, which I can understand might be frustrating for some. It's always nice to have a side that you can vouch for, but truly for both sides in this situation, both have proved to be unreliable in different scenarios, and it's best to separate the wrongdoings on both sides and see them for how they are, rather than seeing this situation as a Yumi and Juni versus their ex-friends sort of situation. To Juni and Yumi's ex-friends watching this, I really hope you reconsider posting Juni and Yumi's personal information in a server that's supposed to be for proof against Juni and Yumi, because you are genuinely further incriminating yourself by posting this information in a server like that. I do genuinely wish you guys well, and that you guys will also get out of the same harmful habits that Juni and Yumi were in, and I hope you're able to move on from this part of your life and no longer continue to dox people or do anything of that sort. To Juni and Yumi, I hope that you both continue to recover and that you realize your mistakes and how they can hurt people. I also hope that you continue to realize that the way you acted towards certain people was extremely malicious and was not excusable in any sort of context. I hope that you can take that guilt and channel it into something better, and I want to see you guys as better people. I hope in the future that you're able to look back on this and be proud of how far you've came. And for viewers watching this video, I hope that you found this video at least a little bit insightful, or maybe you learned something from this video. If you have any criticisms with this video, please let me know. I may have missed out certain things because they were either too personal to mention, so if you see something that isn't here, that's probably why, but I may have just forgotten, and if you want clarification, please comment and I'll let you know. And finally, I want to say thank you to my Ko-Fi members. I really appreciate all the support from you guys, and it's really nice to know that people will pay for my content. Like, I don't know, that just feels kind of crazy to me. I hope you Ko-Fi members enjoyed the early release of this video, and if you're interested in becoming a Ko-Fi member, there's details in my description. Thank you for watching,